Hello, I'm Steve Rastall. It's the Podding Along podcast, and I've got another guest with me today, Mark. But rather than me give the background on Mark, I'm going to let Mark tell you about himself. Over to you, Mark.
Thank you, Steve, and thank you for having me. Hello, everybody. My name's Mark Mills. I'm a non-exec director of various companies. I've built my own companies up in the past, and now I've been helping business owners to build theirs up and sell them on. So that's my current career.
You get to, you build a business, you sell a business. How did you get to where you are today? So where was it where you started out and you thought, I'm going to have a go myself?
Well, appreciating it's a podcast and no one wants me to go back to when I was at school, I'll cut to the chase. So always really interested in business and particularly business models. So I always pick things up in the supermarket and say to my wife, that's a great business model, or that's not a great business model. So a bit obsessive over models and how businesses work and operate. And I got to this point because I had a business which was relatively small but quite successful, where my brother and I were in business together, and we came up with the idea of advertising on post boxes. And a very long story short, we ended up selling that business not once but twice. And on the back of selling it the second time, we had an office with cars and computers and desks and chairs, but no actual business. So we went to the US to look for an idea, and we found one, but there's a few stories along the way with that. And as a result of exiting that business, people said to me, you obviously know what you're doing on the exit front, so can you help us with our businesses? And 15 years later, I'm still helping people build them up and then sell them on.
So when you sold yours, how did you make that transition? Because I've spoke to a few guys and I've exited a business, but I've never really stopped working or changed. What I mean by that is I still do the same thing one way or another.
Sure.
How did you find that thing? You work hard to get the success you want, and then it's finished. And probably you weren't that old.
No, interestingly, because I was 36 at the time of a good exit, and that was a challenge in itself, really, because I did try and retire for a couple of weeks, and I realised that if I retired, I'd end up divorced at the same time. So 3 weeks in, my wife and children sat me down and said, why don't you buy an office and go back to work? So I literally did the same thing I'd done 7 years prior and had an office with a phone and computers and my car outside and actually no business. And I kept the same secretary who's been with me for 20 years now. And she said, what are we going to do? I said, I don't know, but I'll think of something. So literally, I'm pretty good on this sort of business idea origination, because I've sat there a couple of times drumming my fingers thinking, what should I do next? But the transition to a non-exec is an interesting one, because I think that when you're running a business and you're probably the owner or the chief exec or whatever, you have a particular way of approaching things. But actually, a lot of the skills are transferable into becoming a non-exec, because you've got used to getting other people to do things. And really what a non-exec does is, he or she is a bridge to shareholders as well, but typically act for people who are the shareholders. But what you are doing is really helping a management team to achieve more. So you're really doing what you did with your team originally, but in effect at a higher level, I always say. So I'm dealing with an owner, and they themselves need different handling to employees, because they tend to be alpha males or alpha females, and they take a bit more diplomacy, shall we say, than when someone's your direct report. You can sort of ask them nicely a second time, then tell them to do it. And if they don't do it on the fourth occasion, you can sort of find their happiness elsewhere for them. So, yeah, it's a slightly different thing. But I gave it a lot of thought, the transition piece, and then I've sort of built it into a business model, which I'm obsessed with. So I have a sort of MO for being a non-exec, basically.
Well, there's a couple of things you said that struck with me. The one thing is, people give advice. I only ever wanted to work for myself too, and tried lots of different things. I failed a bit, had a couple of wins. Yeah. And you realise that if you get a strong wind, you're in a good market, and it's growing and it's ramping, you can do well. And you might not be great, but you can do reasonably well. If you get a good idea in that, you can get it going like that. So if you get a good idea in a good market and great people, you can do special things. How do you get where I'm going with that? And how do you relay those things? Because picking the market, picking the idea and building the team, it sounds really easy to give advice on that, but doing it's really bloody hard. Yeah. How do you do it, Mark?
No, it's not easy. You're absolutely right. So it is really that those three elements. It's the business itself, the business model, I would say, within that. So it's what you do, how you do it. So if it's not profitable, the more of it you do, you're just going to make more of a loss. So basically, get it to be profitable and refine what you do. So I start with, look, this is what you do as a business. We need to refine that so you do it the best of your ability. Follow that with the business model, meaning that when you do it, it's profitable. And on the back of that, it's always about the team, because if you haven't got the people to execute it, then it doesn't work. And I tend to do it in that order, because the thing is, if you've got the actual proposition right and then the business model right to be profitable, it's actually easier to find great people because they can then understand it. Whereas if you approach it from, we've got a great team, let's try and figure out a model and a proposition, to me, it's always a bit the wrong way around. So when I go into companies, oftentimes they'll say to me, we need to sort the management out first. Now I say, well, let's have a look at the proposition and the model, and then let's look at the management, because actually they're the executioners of the plan. The plan isn't right, doesn't matter how good they are.
Yeah, I'm thinking that struck. I'm thinking back to years ago when I'm in the previous business to this I had, and I probably made that mistake where we had a business that was doing all right, and we thought we needed better people to do it. And sometimes getting the business right and learning what works and getting that going takes a few years, and time is time. And
Yeah,
you can compress it a bit, but it takes sometimes
it
as
does.
long as it's going to reasonably take. And I got a few people around, and I probably got them in there a bit too early. And I think is that where you think a non-exec comes? Because I've had a few help me over the years to varying degrees of success mind. Two very really worked well for me. A couple of others, turning up for the day rate. How do you make sure you drive that value?
Yeah, I mean, what I do is I do it very consciously. So actually, as a non-exec, I award myself, if the company doesn't, sort of KPIs and say at the outset, this is what you can expect me to deliver. So I know where I'm going with it. So what I've found is we've all done that, by the way. We've all recruited too early. And actually, I never sort of want anyone to beat themselves up over that, because we've done it. And it probably works out okay in the end. You probably just carry too much cost at the outset, really, which obviously isn't great in that respect. But I think the way you drive value it's all about clarity and demonstrability of what you're looking to achieve. And I think that bit lacks in non-execs, because to your point, a lot just sort of turn up for the day rate. They're more bothered about governance. And you've got to have governance, but the main driver is to make the business profitable, employ more people, and do a great job for its customers. So my focus is on, I'm happy to be, as it were, KPI'd on the project of being a non-exec. And actually, when you talk about timeframes, which you sort of alluded to there, I find one of the most difficult things is most people, when they want to sell their business, would love to do it in 6 months. But actual fact, if you're a good non-exec, I say to people, these things take longer, and that's what you should bring to the table. That experience that tells you these things take time. So I typically say to people, it takes between 12 and 30 months to sell your business if you want the right value. My wife says to me, why do you tell people it takes long? I say, because that's the truth. It's easy to deal with. But everybody always seems to want to sell in 6 months, which isn't quite as easy. And I've definitely developed a set of skills wherein I can sort of persuade people that things are going to take longer than they like, because that's just life, I found anyway.
Yeah, I agree with you. I work with a couple of guys. I've done two businesses with now, successfully, the three of us. And they always have a laugh because they say, well, what's the plan with this? And I say 5 more years. It's been 5 more years for quite some
Quite well. I've got a little trick with that. So I say to people now, if you're saying 5 years today, let's say 2029, and then you work back from then, because the fact always moves to the right, doesn't it? There's a law. I should invent a law, name a law. The law of everything moving to the right consistently should be called, like, the entrepreneur's law or something, shouldn't it?
So yeah, there's that like non-exec prep for sale, and I suppose there's a piece where but there is build a good business. You're going to make a sale, you're going to get more money, and I think maybe the world's come into that, and we can come on to that in a moment. The change in how you fund businesses and how the world's looking different in 18 months. What do you think? And this is like, oh Christ, Steve, how do you put that in words? But what are the three things that's really common to get right in hitting a decent number for when you sell?
Um, ease of doing a deal. So I spend a lot of time. The primary thing to do, I find, with business owners to sell a business is to make sure that the person buying your business doesn't feel like if they sign a piece of paper, they're going to look stupid afterwards. So it's a sort of stupidity avoidance policy. So everything tidied up, everything in good order, everything documented, the business firing on all cylinders with an infallible business model invariably will drive A, the price, and B, the certainty of doing a deal. And it's surprising to me to this day how many people just have some things in there where you think, if I was the guy on the other side, the woman on the other side buying this business, what would I be worried about? Would I be so worried about that particular thing that I just wouldn't do the deal? Because I don't want to be the one in the pub when somebody says to me, "What, you bought that company, you idiot," whatever. That's just not a good place to be. So I spend a lot of time with people saying it's all in there, avoiding anybody looking stupid. A function of that is that you will invariably have a better business that you're running anyway, which invariably creates more value. So if you've got it's a good model, no one's going to look stupid buying you, and you then have interrogated your model to a granular degree, so you know all the levers you can pull and the buttons you can press to drive your business. And then the other bit that really makes a difference, I've found, so get the stupidity out of the way, get the business model right, is you cannot overdevelop your sales pipeline. So I have a tracker, which is really simple on an Excel spreadsheet with probabilities across the top, prospects down the side. And what it does is it plots how a customer buys from you. And you overlay that to anybody that you meet that could be a customer. So taking them from a suspect to a prospect to an actual customer. And I have driven a lot of value with customers where they've never had that piece documented. And all right, at the end, you anonymize it. You're not going to give all your secrets away. But if you've got a really well-developed tracker where people can visibly see what you're likely to sell over the coming years and months and years, then that drives a lot of value. And that bit is often left on the table with, we've got great customers, we've got repeat customers, we've got some prospects. And I said, no. Let's get this really nailed down. It's going to drive a lot of value. And again, feeds into the fact that you just run your business better anyway with greater visibility.
Exactly. And I use this word a lot, and consistency.
Yeah.
Because you're saying there, and you look at pipeline, I remember years ago when I started out, you'd have a good run, you always wouldn't know why. But when you track back, it's often, you've started to fix the problem of leads. They're consistent. You then understand the persona of who you sell to, who to say yes to, who to say no to, how the deal's structured. And then you've got that pipeline and you can build it and you can go, we can predict our revenue. Exactly. And you talk to a lot of people and they don't really know how and why their sales come, do they?
No.
And it is hard because sometimes something changes, you don't know what, and it's changed that, and you've got to find it, haven't you?
Yes. And so I agree with you. And in my early days, it was just luck rather than judgment that we sold to people. We put an advert in the Yellow Pages. I'm going back a long time now. And, you saw people and you didn't really have any closing skills or sales skills for that matter. You just explained what you did. You hoped they'd say yes. And, you sold to however many. In fact, in my very first business of selling payphones, basically 1 in 100 people bought from me cold calling. Now, the good news was that I knew it was 1 in 100. So I knew if I only did 60 calls in a day, I wouldn't sell one. But if I did 100, I would. But you've got to take 99 no's along the way. But at least I knew my model. So I think that gave me a really good grounding of it's a numbers game. You're not going to sell to everybody. But what I did realize in that business, which I've carried to this day, is that there are certain things that people do. So my mantra is most people buy the same or similar products in the same or similar time frame in the same or similar way. And when you get that into your head, you think, that's true, actually. Most of my customers have actually bought from me following the same path. Well, write the path down, have it as probabilities, and walk all of your prospects through that. Some still won't buy from you. Some will drop off right at the end, which is frustrating. But most times you'll bring them on as customers because they've been through the correct journey with you to buy from you. And that basically sets the business on fire typically. And people turn around to me after 6 or 12 and say, wow, we're motoring now and our business model's right and we've fixed the management team. And they're in a much better place to do a transaction than they were prior.
If we take this just a slightly different angle, same thing. I think, why did I start the business? And it wasn't all about money, genuinely. It's
Madness.
been part of it. Yeah. And I'm thinking, you deal with these entrepreneurs, different ones, different businesses. Why do you think they do it? And what do you think the sale means to them? And by that, I'll qualify that. I mean, in all ways, emotionally, not the financial side, that final destination. That
It's achievement. So years ago, somebody cleverer than me told me that people work for fun, achievement, recognition, then money in that order. So if you don't enjoy it, you won't do it. If you don't achieve anything, you won't. If you don't get recognised, and we're rubbish at recognition in this country, getting better, but not as good as the Americans, for example. And lastly, it's money. So if you use that as the basis for employing people, it actually also applies to yourself. So I find with entrepreneurs, they set up in business because they're normally unemployable. They've seen the requirement of what they do and they know they can do it better. Good. When they sell, really, it is about the money to a degree, but it's more around the I've done that and I've achieved it. And interestingly, most people for whom I sell out actually want to do it again because they've enjoyed the journey so much versus the destination. And that's why I said madness before, that it is a form of madness wanting to run a business. When you consider that you could earn good money in turn, 9 till 5 and go home and not have to think about it. Why, as entrepreneurs, we spend our lives thinking about business consistently, it sometimes does baffle me. But, we're cut from that cloth, aren't we, with the value creators of society.
I think it makes you feel alive, doesn't it?
Yeah.
When you're doing something. And I was 10 years older than you when I had to go at retiring. I was 46, and I did it for 6 months.
Yeah.
So you do then get back on the horse, and that's what I did. And I wasn't really working towards, I've heard people say, "Oh, why don't you stop? You don't need to work anymore." They don't get it. It was never the reason to start. It was never to get on a beach. I can't quite describe why we do it, and maybe yours are different to mine, but I find it an interesting topic.
Well, I find that, Stephen, and I've never been asked that question by a true entrepreneur. I've only ever been asked it by people who just work in a business because they don't understand. A true entrepreneur doesn't say, "Come on, Millsy, you could retire." And you say, you only get that from people who really, truly don't understand it. Any one entrepreneur says, "Well, you wouldn't stop, would you?" Because I suggest that we'll get better as we go along anyway. So actually, I once met a billionaire and he said to me, "The best is yet to come." And I just thought it was a great way of looking at life. He said, "You don't know how good it's going to be yet because you've come this far and you've not even scratched the surface." So I sort of live by that, really.
Well, yeah, I don't agree with completely what I'm about to say, but I had a mentor many years ago, just after when I was trying to just get work and jobs, a successful guy, very wealthy. And I once said, he once said, somebody said to him, "What are you going to do with all that money? You can't take it with you." He said, "How do you know? Have you never been there?"
A bad one, is it?
Yeah, it's not appropriate completely in these modern times. But it's I think it gives you freedom, doesn't it? And after that, you enjoy the bit on the road. So we talked about how you got here. You've been non-exec in businesses. I picked up now you're trying to help people sell those businesses and push that a bit more. And then I guess private equity's been part of that. Now, what are your thoughts on what are happening in that space? And I'm referring more to high interest rates, not cheap capital anymore. People may be wanting a return, on capital efficiency rather than just pure growth. Hire a load of people, throw the money at the job, hit the number of acceleration. That gets you a multiplier, and you check out. You take your entrepreneur's relief, which is now more or less gone, and you're all rich and you're all made it. And I just think that world has changed.
It has. So can I answer with a hopefully amusing anecdote to demonstrate the seriousness of the question? So when I got my offer for my main business, which was a cash machine thing called CardPoint, I got an offer. You can't tell anybody. We were on the market at the time, the stock market. But at the point when I could tell my wife, I went home and I said to her, "I know it's been 7 long years. You've hardly seen me. I've hardly seen you and the kids. But I finally had an offer, and this is it. Everything I said I'd achieve, I'm nearly there now." And at that point, I had 300 people. We had offices in 3 countries. We're turning over 100 million, making 20. So it was a very good business. And the offer was about $250 million. And I said to her, so this, it's pretty good, isn't it? And she looked at me and she sort of turned slowly away. We're in the kitchen at home, and she walked towards the kitchen window and she said, and I thought at this point, she's going to say something so profound. I'm going to remember this for the rest of my life. And she said to me, "It looks like it's going to rain. Will you bring the washing in?" Which obviously I hadn't phased her with my success. So the thing is, at that point of doing a deal, what I'd realised, which is important to the priority question, is I was the only person in the room when I was trying to do my deal that was really, really bothered about me. And this is no disrespect to lawyers and corporate finance people and the rest of them, but they weren't as interested in me if someone was trying to chip my price down because they were roughly getting the same fee. So I ended up thinking I could help people when they're doing an exit. Now, it's particularly true in the private equity world because for that question you answered, there are a lot of complications and moving parts and not as certain an outcome as people would sometimes believe. So I quite like going into companies where we end up taking in private investment because if you've been through it, and I've been through it both successfully and not successfully, so I've had it both ways a couple of times, then you can definitely help people because that is a real difficult one I've found for entrepreneurs to get involved in and make a good fist of. Because that earlier point about skill sets with owners, you've got another skill set dealing with institutional investors. So quite often I find that when there are three options on the table, sell the business, get private in, and then sell the business, or list the business on the stock market, the pure play sale is the most attractive because those private elements that you alluded to about working out the cost of capital, what's the return going to look like? Are we going to be able to drive an exit? What's it going to look like in terms of trading when we've got an indebted business, which normally entrepreneurs don't have and don't like? And then you're carrying debt and you're subject to the vagaries of the Bank of England saying interest rates are going up and your P&L's getting shot to pieces. You know, that is a very difficult arena. If done correctly, it's a very high functioning version of capital. But there's more, I would say, less successful private equity deals. They may end up in an exit, but not as successfully as people thought they would than a particularly publicised, I would wager. So it's a really carefully thought out one if you're going into it before you leap, I would say.
Yeah, great, good answer, Marco. I don't know that world, you see, so that's interesting and insightful for me. And I picked out a couple of points there, if I may. I did some research. Is Angela your wife? Is that?
Yeah.
But how do you balance? Because I know I probably wouldn't have got as far in life without my wife.
No, I'm the same.
How do you think that? You're just to the side there, if you wouldn't mind. And I get it's a personal piece, so it can be limited. But how do you think that helps people be successful?
I think what I do, and this does, I mean, most of the times I'll qualify it with it drives my wife mad because I do, but I do things like I say to her, look, let's look at it like a business thing. So, for example, I used to go on holiday and pretty much ruin the holiday by working all the time. So I came up with an idea, which is I always get up earlier than everybody else anyway. So I will do an hour in the morning and then at night I can get ready quicker than everybody before we go and eat. So I'll do an hour at night. And I just tell everyone, you can get me in the morning, you can get me at night. But in the middle of the day, I'm going to be throwing the kids in the swimming pool and diving for coins and all that stuff, or in the sea or whatever. So I can, and it doesn't matter what time zone I'm in because I'm going to catch somebody early or late. And I can do a lot in an hour when I've only got an hour to do it in. And I've told everyone I'm on holiday. So I've done various things with my wife over the years where I've said, this will work for us and this will keep us sort of married because otherwise you go on holiday, you may as well not have gone. Nobody enjoys it. You know, it's a miserable thing. The other thing I found as a fairly consistent theme is that people seem to like it when you've been married a long time. We've been married over 30 years now. Because if you say to somebody, if somebody says to me, are you committed to this? I'll say, well, I'm pretty committed as a person. I've been married for 30 years. That's number one. And that's a nice attribute, I think, of anybody, that you will commit something and see it through. You know, and every marriage has good times and bad times. Every business has good times and bad times. You don't want people bailing out your business just because times are getting tough. And then the last thing I would say is that my wife is good as she did with that example of keeping me on the ground. So, you know, we met each other when I had absolutely nothing, and you know, so I can't probably suggest that she didn't love me for just who I am. So, you know, she will say to me, don't get ahead of yourself here. You know, I remember when, you know, you were completely broke and chatting me, pretend you weren't broke.
Same here. My wife was a teacher. I didn't have much but dreams. You know, you don't get much, you can't put those in the bank at first, can you?
No.
The other thing, just touching this private equity bit, that when I look at, you know, I know the tech space, well, that's all I've ever really done apart from early in career doing different jobs while you gain experience. But I look at it now, and we've never taken on funding, bootstrap businesses. One very successful in my own way. It did what I needed to get to where I wanted in life. Then you look now and you think, years ago, you'd look at the money, you might do it. All right, you've got a sausage machine. What's it cost to acquire a customer? You need salespeople, or external, then internal, then it's changing again. And you take on that money to build that growth. AI, software now that does a lot for not a lot of money. If you understand that, you can build that sales machine without lots of people. You can build software cheaper, and there's still a cost to the acquisition and everything else. But the playing field's changed. We're bootstrapping it, as I'd call it. We have had some investment in a way where I've done it myself, but that's going to make the game hard for these private equity boys, isn't it? Because their card is, we can give you the money that lights you up. People might be saying we can light up pretty well without it.
Yeah, I think there'll always be that. I think a mechanism for private equity, which I think is underutilized, or they may argue differently, is use it as a part exit. So, the ones I've done, the owners of, instead of selling outright, we've sold to private equity. They've taken some money off the table on the basis that we're going to build a bigger team around them. And then you go on to sell it again. And that gives the private house their return and the owner another bite of the cherry. So that, I think, is where there could be a point of differentiation, because you sort of accelerate your wealth creation by taking some money off the table along the way, as opposed to in that example you've given where you bootstrap and in the end get the final exit. So I think there's a nice aspect to that. And BGF, the sort of government-backed version, identified that a few years ago and have been giving people some money off the table. I wouldn't really go into a private equity deal now, or wouldn't advise anyone to, unless they were taking some money off the table. Because if they're not, then really what you're getting is sort of venture capital, which is more of your funding, sort of earlier on, isn't it, really? So, yeah, I mean, the landscape's changing, and it's going to change again if, the budget, they change the rules on private equity, because their return's going to change. And unless we get a reduction in interest rates to normalised levels, shall we say, then the cost of capital, to your earlier point's high. So, I mean, we're getting a bit sort of detailed for people, aren't we? But, there's a lot of stuff coming around. It'd be interesting, to your point, to look at it in 12 or 18 months again.
Yeah, I agree. I think it just means you've got to make the money work harder, doesn't it? And because it costs more. So how does that all go? So that then maybe links back, if I may, to yourself. So you've helping people sell their businesses. And we all think, because it's a bit like the old, if I've got a pub, if I go to the pub, I know how to run a pub. You know that mentality?
Yeah.
If I run a business, I must know how to sell a business. I doubt that's quite the case. Just give us some ideas about the delusions people like me might have.
Well, the example I always give, it's the estate agency example, isn't it? So if somebody knocks on your door, so I'd love to buy your house, and you're thinking, gosh, I wish I'd mended that leaky roof and painted the back lounge and done the garden up. You're not ready. But you live in your house. You know how to live in your house, but do you know how to sell your house? So with a business, it's sort of got some similar attributes. So what I say to people, that a dangerous thing to do, so a bit of like non-advice, is don't run it on the basis of, I'm just running it now to sell it. Because if you do that artificially, you tend to not be doing the right things for your team and for your customers or your suppliers necessarily. So exactly to your point, it's a different mentality and approach. So oftentimes owners need quite a lot of education into the fact that other people are going to be looking at their entity that they've created, warts and all. Because what most owners do, and I still get this, is they don't really tell me all the bad stuff at the beginning, because they're a bit embarrassed and they want to look like they've got a great company. And they normally have. It's just that every company's got some bad stuff in it, difficult stuff, staff issues, supply issues, customer issues, whatever. So what you've got to get is a sort of open mentality going, where people will take on board what you're saying for the best reasons, which is we're going to try and sell it. Once they've sort of opened up, and within that, to my earlier point, they'll then start to question themselves about the proposition. So yeah, we are good, but we're not as good as we could be, and we know we're not. Or what about the business model? We could make more money if we did it a bit differently. What about the management team? Yeah, we could do better with the management team. Once you've got that sort of openness and mentality, and importantly, an end goal, because most business owners are completer finishers, because you couldn't run a business without sort of getting a customer, looking after the customer, doing this thing for the customer, invoicing the customer, job done for customer. So they're not sort of perpetual people in that sense. So once you've got an end goal and an open sort of mind to how it works, the last part of the equation really, Steve, is that you have to educate them in how to put it into a form that's buyer friendly. So buyers accept information in a certain way and order. And if you don't put it that way, you're just making your own life harder. So I do a lot of work, people saying, look, I know you can sell your business till the cows come home, to customers, to new staff, to suppliers when you need credit, but selling it to a buyer and extracting millions of pounds from them is of itself a skill. And that bit they tend to find really interesting because they sort of say, oh, I've never really done it like that. Interestingly, oftentimes they then use that presentation for customers because there's a lot you can take from it in terms of how you present. And I do a lot of things with people, rehearsing them. I drive people mad with my rehearsals. I have dress rehearsals. And I had a guy once said to him, we're doing a dress rehearsal. And he came in without a tan and said, you need to put a tie on. He said, well, it's only you. I said, no, we're doing it like a proper dress rehearsal. So he went and tied his tie, but he tied it like you did when you're at school, like this.
You have to teach him the wins and not. Yeah, teach him the wins and not. I think what you're referring to there, I take out of that most people, not all, but might sell a business once. And I think the first sale that makes more important because it is getting that stake in the ground, getting some money and making that point in life for maybe others around you as well. You might go on to do 2, 3 more and you learn and things change. So if you only ever do something once, if you do this once, you're not as good at it as if you do it 100 times.
That's right.
And I think that's the point. And practice, repetition, 10,000 hours, that is how success is done, isn't it? It's the hard yards.
And I was sort of lucky because we sold a business. Our first business we basically wrapped up. The second one we sold for £1, but we did actually sell it. The third one we had for years and it just sort of withered on the vine. So we didn't build the model right. And the fourth one, I decided I'm going to really figure out this business model stuff. And we did well on that one, sold it twice. But on that one of the lessons we learned along the way, just as an anecdote, was my brother was selling a Cavalier car once and it was like 300 quid basically. And the guy offered him 250 and he said, no, because we always used to say never accept the first offer. And he ended up getting like 275, whatever. When we sold our postbox business, they made us an offer, which was a lot more than we thought it was going to be. And I was physically shaking when I was ringing my brother to say how much the offer was. We sold it to an outdoor advertising company. And he said, well, obviously we're going to rip their arm off, are we? And I said, no, this is when it's men and boys stuff. We never accept the first offer. And we didn't speak to them for a week. And I nearly dialed them a number of times. I can still remember the beginning of the phone number. But eventually they phoned a week later and they said, we're not heard from. I said, well, if you're going to throw derisory offers around, then, we're not going to be friends anymore, are we? And they doubled the offer. So the second time I sold a business, and every time I've sold one since, say to people, we are never going to accept the first offer in a million years. And everyone always wants to accept the first offer because they got an offer, we're going to accept it. And I'm like, no, honestly, don't accept the first offer from anybody for anything. It never works.
Well, because it's always worth what somebody else will pay for something, anything, and often they'll pay far more than you realise.
Exactly.
And so, if you take that forward now, I'm just trying to then round out. Mark's out there helping people sell their companies. You've got the T-shirt. You've got undoubtedly got success behind you doing that. But if somebody said to you, "Well, that's all great, Mark, but how will you earn me more money?" And I think you half answered the question just now, but that's why I want to stretch it further and think, well, I pay you. Why will I get more? How will I get more? And how do we measure that almost?
Yeah. So again, right. So my KPI thing is a non-exec. So, and I do believe you should have this across an organisation. So in my own organisation, which grew quite big, as I said, I had 7 guys with 7 KPIs. Now I had 7 KPIs. They knew what they were. They knew what the reward was for hitting them. They knew the timeframes around it. So in the case of me selling the business, I go in with a very specific agreement that says this is where we are. So I accept what you say is your valuation, and you're going to pay me some of the upside. I charge a monthly fee, but the main component is part of the upside, which is purely measured on the financial success. And within that, the cash on day one is the most important element because, again, most earnouts don't tend to work. So, we like the sort of high number valuation, but the cash in the bank after fees and tax is what you can spend. So my whole mantra is that we agree very clearly at the beginning. Now, I always say to people, I've got a little bit of an advantage if there's some affliction of time here, because this is going to take some time when your business should get naturally better. But my aim is to get the curve to go upwards, as you said before. And within that, I'm creating value. How do you do it? Well, it's granularity, it's interrogation of the business model, it's examining what your proposition is fully and deeply, it's working on your management team, it's how you present it to the outside world. It's using good lawyers, good corporate finance guys alongside us to get a deal done. And all of these things, when I typically go in, haven't been what the owners have done. What's typically happened, and in your viewers may empathise with this, is you get a call from your accountant who says, I've got a new client. He'd be really interested in chatting to you. He might want to buy your business. You go for lunch with them. It just comes to nothing after a lot of frustration. And you think, blimey, I can't sell this business. But actually, you were never ready anyway. If the guy had his checkbook out, you wouldn't have been ready. So I say, look, turn the process on its head. You're not for sale. We're going to work on it a lot. We're going to build value. And then when we're ready, we'll have found a load of buyers. So this is another value add. I go and find buyers because my name isn't on anything. I'll go and find buyers and read their strategy documents, go and meet the chief execs, go and meet the funders, whoever, and have a list of people who could buy the business, who've got the money, who are acquiring things, who are in the right sectors, whatever. And then you're ready and you've got actual proper buyers who could execute a transaction with you. And that's how you create value in my part of the world.
Yeah, you've got a profile, you know who they look like, and you're focused on not jam tomorrow, the money in the bank today. I remember a school friend of mine, his dad sold the business. I would be about 15, and he was that stuck in my mind about him using that phrase because he didn't want the jam. He wanted to go off and live in France.
Yeah.
So you've got that. So just in summary now, helping people sell the business. We touched on it before, but it just came into my mind that why entrepreneurs carry on. You're a wealthy man, you're successful. Why still do this though? About this particular area? What?
The true main driver is because a lot of business owners get turned over, to use a phrase, without proper help. And it's not necessarily intentional. It's just a function of a dysfunctional market. You've never done it before, as you said. So you're the only person in the room that doesn't really know all the terminology and what's going on. And with the greatest of respect to your lawyers and accountants, everyone else on your side, they just want to get the deal done at that last stage. And if you end up not getting a great deal or signing too many warranties or whatever, you're the one carrying that can, not them. So I honestly got into it and still do to this day, really as a sort of protection because I didn't have that. As a function of that, people will pay me because I'll be the one in the room. And I've got lots of examples. I'll tell you a funny one in a minute, where I am literally that person in the room with the owner saying, no, I don't agree. No, we're not doing that. No, he or she's not signing that. No, we're not accepting that. And there's no one else putting up a fight. And the owner doesn't necessarily want to be billed as the bad person because they're going to have a longer relationship with their buyer. Whereas I can say, look, I'm just representing them. I know the score here. So, you're not going to pull the wool over our eyes. So I have had a few theatrical ones where I've said to the owner, we're going into this meeting. And if they say they're going to try and chip us, we literally just stand up and walk out. And we had one once where we nodded to him. We stood up, walked out. And it was a bit of a scene from a film where we were getting to lift and they were chasing us down the corridor to get us to come back. And we were pressing the button to get the lift to close. And then it closed just as they got up to it. And then we didn't speak to them for a few days. And then they came back and revised their offer upwards and we got the deal done. So you've sometimes got to be the person in the room that will stand up and say no, or something even stronger than that. And also, I do set the scene with people on deals where at the outset I say to them, I've been around the block. And when you do that thing at 10 o'clock at night, when we're on the last throes of the deal in the lawyer's offices, and you do a very shallow knock on the door, and you've got a long face, and you want to say you're going to knock £1 million off. Don't say the words, because we will stand up and walk out. And the funny thing is, they always do it, and they come in and they knock, and I always say to them, if you're going to say the words, just turn around and go, because we'll be following you out the door. So don't say it. We'll do the deal, but don't say it. Don't try and chip us. It does.
Because you get it in all walks of life, and it's just holding your bottle, as it were.
Yeah,
My dad was a bookmaker, so I do know about how we used to edge bets and holding your bottle. And I think what it comes down to is when I started out, there were a few deals where they were critical to my family, to the business, even to paying the wages. And you need that deal, but you can't bottle it because you know you give money away. But you might adjust that a little bit and think, well, no, I'm not going to push quite as hard because I do need it done. And there's a it depends, measured, adaptation to that process. But I think the thing you're referring to is, if I may, is the entrepreneur, if it's really important to them, there's emotion in there. When there's emotion in there, it affects your clear thinking.
it
Like
does.
when I know I do this business now, when I've got a level of financial independence, I can be far clearer about what I do. That if you're there, you're non-emotive, you're independent financially, and in an advisory sense, I think that's quite a powerful thing for somebody to have,
Yeah.
because best will in the world, it's going to get to you, isn't it?
And at that point, there's a thing they call deal fever. Everyone's got it. Everyone's panicking about, is it going to get done on both sides of the table? And actually, you do need somebody that's just sort of the cool as a cucumber, bowling around, saying it'll all be fine, but we're not agreeing to that, or we'll agree to that, or we won't. I've had some real crackers where the other side have been under massive pressure to do the deal, and we've got to a point on that last day where we've literally said, well, we're not signing that. They've said, yeah, that's fine. Well, we'd like this. Yeah, that's fine. Well, we want this as well. That's fine. Because it's gone the other way, that the dynamic has changed, that they've got to get this done. And you're then, well, we might as well ask for a bit more if we can get it, So, don't miss an opportunity. But
Well, it's the game, isn't it? And I'm going to change the direction, if I can, a bit,
sure.
just to sort of take us towards a finality. But deputy lieutenant,
Yes.
tell us about that, please, Mark.
Not wanting to sound funny about it, it's in the UK we call him a lieutenant, not a lieutenant.
Oh, right. Well, there's something to learn, right?
I know, because it's spelt lieutenant, so we all say it. But so basically, His Majesty has a representative in every county, which is the Lord Lieutenant, and the Lord Lieutenant appoints deputies. So basically, if the King is asked to come and open a hospital or whatever, and he can't make it, he delegates to his family, and if not to them, then to the Lord Lieutenant. And the other Lord Lieutenant task is to always greet the royal family when they come into the county. So the Lord Lieutenant is quite thinly spread because there's a lot going on, and in our case, she has other roles to do. So she deputises. So I very honoured to have been asked to be one, and I end up doing some fantastic ceremonies to do with citizenship. So I can help people take the oath to become a citizen, and I do things like Remembrance Sunday to lay a wreath and things like that, and then go to some really interesting things on behalf of the monarch. So yeah, it's not a very well known role, but actually does have some significance because you are representing the royal family, and you get a uniform and a sword, which there's a little bit of imposter syndrome because I've not had a military career, and everybody that puts on says, I feel a bit of a fraud wearing a military uniform. People in the forces salute you, and you have to salute them back and things like that, which takes a bit of getting used to. But you're there to represent the monarch, and you're there to uphold the values of the monarch as well. So, very interesting.
Well, you an honour.
Yeah, well, thank you. And if you're ever asked, Steve, I'd embrace the invitation because it's
That's going to be a concern for me. But you never know, though. I should hold out. Yeah, you go through life, don't you? And it's funny the twists and turns that you get that, and it's. I've never spoken to anybody who's done that. I did see somebody. They live in Tarpley, where I live, and I think they do that role around where we are. They
yes.
help with a preschool, or the husband did, where we did some help as well, myself and my wife. But you're the first person I've ever spoken to about it.
Oh, great. Well, I mean, look, I think you said about entrepreneurs before, what drives you. I mean, not to put too fine a point in, but some of the stuff I've been exposed to from being in business, I got to have a tour of a nuclear submarine. I mean, that how it came about is a really weird story, but that was fascinating. I've ended up representing His Majesty at things and going to like the Christmas Carol service with Kate Middleton and the Princess of Wales, things like that. And you just think none of that would have happened if I'd have just sort of got a job when I left school. It's that drive to do things and see things. I think you're open to opportunities, aren't you? So and life tends to present them to you. So I fully encourage people to be entrepreneurial. And I always say to them, by the way, it doesn't always work out. We've all had our failures, so don't let that stop you.
Well, I think it's Yes. What is it? A well-known one, isn't it? And a few others. And the failures, it's only temporary. Giving up lasts forever, doesn't it? So, but you've got to be cut out for that.
Yeah. My family motto I designed a few years ago is, well, it's failure cannot live with persistence. I used to have it on a board behind my desk. So you keep going, you don't fail, do you?
So if anybody wanted to get hold of you, just a little bit of a pitch about where you're at, what you're doing, and how to get hold of Mark.
Well, I've got a really easy website. So my domain name is www.mark.co.uk. And my email is mark@mark.co.uk, which interestingly does mean I get a lot of spam, mainly from people called Mark checking into hotels about 6 o'clock at night who can't be bothered putting their actual email. Most evenings I'm checking into the Hilton in Birmingham or the Sofitel in Glasgow, but called Mark Smith or something. But yeah, so hopefully easy to find on the website or drop me an email. And I'm big on LinkedIn. Hopefully I like LinkedIn. I get a lot of work from that and hopefully offer some tips and advice as well. And I can only thank you, Steve, for having me on your podcast. It's been really good fun.
Well, thank you. And I've got one last question.
Fire away.
If they did one thing to get a good price for their business, what would it be?
One thing. Refine your business model to the nth degree.
Well, thank you, Mark. I've enjoyed having you on. If there's another angle with this, maybe we could talk again. I hope we can.
I'd look forward to it.
Yeah, and I'm gonna quit the session